All right, this week we're going to learn the quadratic formula. We talked about the discriminant last week, so we're only going to look at how to solve using the quadratic formula. So this will work for any type of quadratic equation. So if y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, and a does not equal 0, then x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so you should recognize this inside part, b squared minus 4ac. That was the discriminant. Okay, so that's what we talked about last week. So we're going to use that discriminant to actually find what our solutions are. The key, though, is that all terms must be on one side and in standard form. So we have to be equal to 0. So if we want to solve the following using the quadratic formula, we're going to leave our answer in simplified radical form. If you need to, go back and look at, let's see, 9.3. That was when we did simplified radical form. So 5x squared minus x minus 48 equals 0. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to determine what is a equal, b equal, and c equal. So 5x squared means that a equals 5. Negative x means that b equals negative 1. And negative 48 is our c value. So if we plug in, and I'm going to start off with always rewriting our formula because that we want to make sure that we memorize this. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now we're going to plug in. So we have negative, and our b value, negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b, so negative 1 squared minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is negative 48, all over 2 times 5. Okay, so we have negative 1. A negative times a negative is a positive, plus or minus the square root, negative 1 squared. So negative 1 times a negative 1 is a positive 1. And then we have negative 4 times 5, which is 20, times negative 48, which is going to give us a positive 960, all over, and 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, we're going to simplify the inside of our square root. So we have x equals 1 plus or minus. 1 plus 960 is 961, all over 10. So we have 1 plus or minus. So if we take the square root of 961, it does end up giving us a whole number, so 31 over 10. And now we're going to break this up into two equations. So we have x equals 1 plus 31 over 10, and break it up again and do x equals 1 minus 31 over 10. So that plus or minus is going to give us our two solutions. So 1 plus 31 is 32 over 10, which can reduce. Both of those are even, so we can divide by 2. So we get 16 over 5. And then 1 minus 31 is negative 30, divided by 10 equals negative 3. So our solutions for x are 16/5 and negative 3. Okay. Looking at the second example, 2x squared plus 9x equals 8. So here we're not equal to 0, so we need to start off by subtracting our 8, move it to the other side. So we have 2x squared plus 9x minus 8 equals 0. And then we can do what a equals b, which a equals 2, b equals 9, and c equals negative 8. And then we have our equation, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So plugging in, we have negative b, which is 9, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 9 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 8, all over 2 times a, which is 2. So we have negative 9 plus or minus the square root. So 9 squared is 81. And then we have negative 4 times 2 gives us negative 8, and negative 8 times negative 8 is a positive 64. All over 2 times 2, which is 4. So x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root. So if we add 81 plus 64, we get 145, all over 4. And now we need to look, can we break up the square root of 145? So 145 can divide by 5, and we would get 29 and 5. But 29 can't go into anything, so we can't simplify this any further. So x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 145 over 4 is our solution. If you want, you can break this up into two values, negative 9 plus the square root of 145 over 4, and negative 9 minus the square root of 145 over 4. Either way would be accepted. Okay. And looking at C, we have 2x squared minus 2x equals 7. So if we subtract the 7 to the other side, we have 2x squared minus 2x minus 7 equals 0. So a equals 2, b equals negative 2, and c equals negative 7. So x equals, we have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So plugging in what we know, we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times negative 2. Oops, sorry. That was wrong. How about times positive 2, because that's our a value, times negative 7. All over 2a, so 2 times 2. All right, so negative 2 is a positive 2, plus or minus the square root. Negative 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, and negative 8 times negative 7 is a positive 56, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root. 4 plus 56 is 60, all over 4. So 60 can break apart. If we try to take the square root of 60, we get a decimal, but we know that this can be rewritten as 2 plus or minus 60 can be the square root of 4 times the square root of 15, all over 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. So one thing we need to check for is looking to see, can we reduce? So we're always going to look at these three numbers on the outside. So 2, 2, and 4, they're all even. So we can divide them all by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1 again. The square root of 15 will stay the way it is. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. And that is your simplified answer. So one thing that you need to be careful about is reducing the fraction. And here we reduced by dividing by 2. You're always going to leave the inside of the square root the way it is. One example that's not in your notes here would be, what if we simplify and we get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 25 over 3. Okay, remember we can't take the square root of a negative, so here we would actually get no solution. Because cannot take the square root of a negative. Okay, if you have any questions, make sure you're emailing your teacher or attending a Zoom office hour. Have a good week.